Hey folks, welcome back to another review with yours truly, Sam Healey. Today we're taking a look at this guy right here, Edge of Humanity. It's put out by Golden Egg Games, and that might seem possibly familiar to you because there was another game that I reviewed about a year ago, I guess, maybe a little bit more than that, called Rome: Rise to Power. I really enjoyed that game, and this is the next one that is on their docket, so to speak, that I was interested in. And so when we were at Gen Con, took a look at it there, played it a couple more times at Gen Con, and so I think I've put in my dues to be able to review it now, and so that's what we're doing. It's basically a Dominion-esque deck builder with a post-apocalyptic survival theme wrapped around it. So let's go ahead and get down to the table. I'll show you how it works, and then we'll hit up some final thoughts after that. So here I have a setup for you, a three-player game of Edge of Humanity. The game is going to end in one of two different ways. The first way is that a person reaches a certain number of victory points that's determined before the game begins. A regular basic game is 11 points, and then if you want to play an extended game, it's 17 points. The other way that you can, that the game can end is by the event deck running out. And so basically, after the fourth phase, which is the recruit phase, is over, once one of those two game-ending triggers has happened, then that's the end of the game. Whoever has the most points is the winner. And there are some cards, some of the survivors that can be in your colony that will score you more points after the game has ended. So what basically is going to happen is each person, there's going to be a first player token, and whoever has that is going to go through each of these phases in order, and then the next person will be the first player, and so forth and so on. So whoever has the first player will first go through the event phase, which is simply turning one of the event cards over, reading it, and then we have to carry out a certain number of things. We'll talk about that later. After that, each player in turn order will take an action phase where they're going to be using cards from their hand in a Dominion-esque style format where you're going to be using cards out of your hand and then at the end of your turn refilling your hand back up to your hand limit, which is 5. But you may not use all of the cards in your hand, and you can carry them over from round to round. We'll get to that in more detail after that. Now, after the action phase, after all players have done their action phase, we go to a trade phase where we start bidding on these different columns of action cards that are going to be going into your discard pile. And then after that, we go to a recruit phase where if we have any survivors in our hand, we can pay the number of cargo that's necessary to recruit them into our colony. And then after that, we'll go to a cleanup phase where we will refill the empty columns on the supply deck over there, and then add cards to some that aren't actually taken during that round. So in the event phase, what will happen here is the person who is first player will take this, turn it over, and then read the card so that everybody can see it. So this one is talking about a pandemic that has begun. Hospitals overflowing with patients are a thing of the past. The sick aimlessly roam the streets knowing that their days are numbered. The only way to escape infection is to avoid them at all costs. Even those infected a week ago are already too far gone. We can't let ourselves suffer the same fate. Finding a cure to this disease is a hopeless dream. For now, we just need to get out of the city. So that would stay over there. That's kind of a story element that would continue on. And then everybody has to basically take this bad action. So you have to choose one of those three things. You have to discard a supply card from your hand, or you have to discard 3 cards, or you have to lose 2 life, which everybody starts with 7, and you would have to lose 2 of those. So everybody would choose to do that right off the bat. I'm just going to go ahead and lose 2 life because if you go down to 0 life, you're not actually out of the game. You just have to sit out the rest of that round, and then you come back with a full complement of health at the beginning of the next round. So dying, quote unquote, in this game isn't necessarily a horrible thing. It can set you back, but it's not the end of the world, so to speak. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase. So once everybody has chosen one of these things, we actually move on to the action phase Now in the action phase is where you actually take your hand of cards and going to be using them for the different things that they can do. The cards have different things on them. For example, if it has this little bag with money with numbers in them, that's a card can be used to bid for more resources in the trading phase, and that's the level of trading power that card has for it. So we'll talk more about the trading phase when we get to it. But also on top of that, this is one supply that can be used to do a number of different things. For example, it can be used to build, to be part of building a safe house. It can be part of recruiting for more survivors to come into your colony. So these supply cards are useful for a number of different things. Then you also have these little watch symbols here, which means that this is your action for the turn. Some cards, if you spend this card, it's going to get you 2 more actions. So an adrenaline shot here will actually give you more actions on your turn, but it's also going to cost you a life point in order to play this card. So if I wanted to, I could play the adrenaline shot. I would have to lose a life back to the pool, and then I would get 2 more actions. So maybe I want to go ahead and do this, and it says take a supply card from one of the trade piles and place it on top of your discard pile. So if I look over there, yeah, I liked this card right here. It's a lot of supplies. It's going to give me 3 more supplies whenever I pull it into my hand. So that'll go to my discard pile. And then I have 1 more action. I'm going to go ahead and start building my safe house right up here. And I can do that by paying both of these and just slipping them underneath the card like so. So now I have begun building my safe house, even though I can't fully complete it. On a next turn, I could complete it playing 2 more down because it's taking 4. And then some of my supply cards you see here have a star, sheriff star with a number in the middle of it. That's how many victory points it's going to give you once you have completely built it. And then inside here, it's another special ability, so my hand size will go up by 1 from 5 to 6 in this specific case. And then once everybody else has carried out all of their actions, since I used all of my cards, these ones that I used will come here like so, and then I would refill my hand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that would be the end of my action phase. All the other players would be able to do that, and then we would move into our trading phase. Now, before we actually do that, I do want to go over one more thing here. These survivor cards, the only way that those can get into your deck is if, when you are refilling your hand, if your draw pile is depleted, you will take, and you still have to refill some cards in your hand, you'll take 1 of these, put it into your discard pile, shuffle your discard pile, and then continue refilling your hand. So that's the only way that these survivors will get into your deck so that you have the chance of recruiting them in the recruit phase. Now in the trading phase, players are going to be able to bid on which column of cards they're going to take. Now if you remember in my turn earlier, I played a card that allowed me to take one of the cards that are in this column. So since we haven't actually refilled that yet, that doesn't happen until the cleanup phase, which happens 2 phases from now, there's going to be vacancies or voids within those columns sometimes. So what would happen here is we would all, actually starting with the start player, we would all determine whether or not we're going to trade. And we do that by simply playing one of our cards or any number of our cards down for their trade value that's right here. All right, so if I wanted to, I could say, well, I'm going to go with... goodness gracious. I'm going to go ahead and play scouting, and I'm definitely going to be trading, and that gives me a trading power of 2. I could have used more cards, but I don't want to because I want to use them in my action phase next turn. So this one, I play it face down, and the other players will do the same thing. We flip them all over, and whoever has the highest gets to pick first. But in this case, we're all tied, so we just start with the start player, and we go around in clockwise order. But if let's say that I wasn't tied, I played a 1 or something like that, then the person that's closest to the start player would go first in clockwise order. All right, so I would pick 1, and everybody else would be able to pick another one. So let's see here. I'm going to go with this over here because that has a lot of supplies in it, plus another building plans, which is going to help me later on. Those go into your discard pile, and then the goods that you used are actually traded away and are put over here. So both of these guys would pick as well. They're probably going to choose, let's see here, this person will probably take this one, and third player over here has the worst pick, and that would be the end of the trade phase. Next would be the recruit phase, where if we had any survivors in our hands, and of course in the first round of the game you're not going to have any survivors in your hand, but later on as you pick up some of these and get them into your deck, you will. But what you would be able to do during the recruit phase is pay the supply cost for whatever survivor you had in your hand, and then he would be able to, let's say I had the contractor in my hand, let's just say that. I could say I am going to recruit the contractor, and I'm going to pay the 2 supply crates. This goes away into the discard pile, not my discard pile, but in the general discard pile over there. And now he's part of my group. He scores me 2 points. He's going to move 1, 2 on the track over here. And then that would be the end of the recruit phase. Everybody has the chance to do that. And then we go into the cleanup phase. Now, during the cleanup phase, each one of these columns is going to be rebuilt. So we have 1 column for each player plus 1. So we're going to make sure that there are 4 columns here, and then if there's a column left, 1 card is added to it. Now, if there had been 2 cards in this column, a 3rd card would be added to it, making it more inviting later on. But since someone had played a card to take from here, only 1 gets added, which means that it's back to its full capacity. Now, another thing that happens in the cleanup phase is that if there is a survivor left over here, then he would be actually discarded and put in the discard pile for the survivors, and then everything shifts over 1 and a new card is revealed. Now, while I'm here, I did want to go over some of the special abilities that these survivors have. For example, here, the postman, he only gives you 1 point, but he does give you the ability of another action on your turn. It says, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 into your hand, and discard the rest. So that's a pretty cool idea for the postman. The family doesn't have any special ability, but they do give you 3 points if you recruit them into your colony. The janitor here is pretty text-heavy, but basically what this guy does is you can play an action card on this card, and then on a later round, you can play this card without spending an action to do it. So if this survivor is removed from your colony, you would discard the action card if, when he's removed, you had an action card on it. In addition to that, he gives you 1 point as well. The VIP, again, no special ability, but he's worth 3 points. So that's pretty cool. The contractor, we saw him earlier, and he just helps you build your buildings a little bit faster. The professor, at the end of the game, you gain 1 survival point for each family survivor in your colony. So this is one of those cards I was mentioning earlier, that even though you weren't the one to end the game by reaching that point total, it's possible for you to still win the game if you had enough family survivors in your colony to put you over that. The politician, at the end of the game, you gain 2 survival points for each VIP survivor in your colony, and he's worth 3. So there's a number of different kinds of survivors in the deck. They're all pretty good. After that, the first player token moves to the next player, and the next first player starts with the next event card, and so forth and so on. And that's basically how the game is played. It's a very simple yet engaging deck builder that has a post-apocalyptic theme wrapped around it, and however the game ends, whether by points or by cards running out, whoever has the most points at the end of that is the winner. So that is Edge of Humanity. It is, again, just a deck builder, and I say that sparingly because usually I don't have an affinity, I guess you could say, for deck building games. I don't mind them so much, but I don't gravitate towards them very much because usually it's just about the mechanism of building up your deck and scoring points from that deck and so forth and so on, and rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. This one, though, has a little bit of a difference to it, though, because when you use supplies from your hand to do things, for example, for building buildings or recruiting new survivors into your colony, they are gone out of your deck. And so you have to go back and find more supplies, either by trading or scavenging or smuggling or doing some of those other things that some of those cards do in the deck. So that was a cool thing. On top of that, there was a new event card storyline element that's added to it. So this is a deck builder, yes, at its core, but on top of all that, there's all this thematic goodness that comes into the game and how you play the game. I really enjoy when a game has a mechanism that I enjoy, which is deck build. But then on top of that, it gives me thematic reasoning why I'm doing the mechanisms that I'm doing. For example, trading. If I just used cards and they went back into my discard pile and I got more supply goods to go into my deck, well, pretty soon I'm going to have so much that it's easy to do all this other stuff. I just have to kind of finagle my way to make sure those cards come up at the same time somehow. That's what I didn't like about games like Dominion. Sometimes, you know, by the end of the game, it's really simple to do all these things. With this game, the struggle is real, so to speak, because you're using supply cards and you're losing them in order to get, hopefully, better supply cards or more points for your deck. But now you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and go and get more supplies in the trading area or using some of those other cards in your deck to get those goods. So I liked that thematic inclusion of having a pretty thin deck at the end of the game that you're just kind of struggling with. I liked it a lot. I don't know exactly why, because usually I don't like very grindy type of games, but this one is just on the cusp of being just grindy enough, but not too grindy where it feels like I'm working. Here, it feels like I'm actually taking part in this colony, building this colony and recruiting survivors, and I'm having to really be efficient with how I'm using my supply goods and how I'm using my cards that are good for trading in an efficient manner. And I liked that because it didn't feel like the rich get richer. You always had a chance to score more points, and you always had a chance to be the person who won the game. And that's one of the things I noticed really early on as I played the game a few times at Gen Con, because there were a couple of times where, like, once I was really in the lead and Mark Streed was really far behind, and by the end of the game there was only like 1 point difference between the two of us. And so I like it when games do that. You know, sometimes there's games where if you're really far behind, why keep playing? You know you're going to lose. This one is not like that, and that's one of the things I really did enjoy about it. The event storyline, the one I was showing, and I only showed one because I didn't want to spoil too much, is the intro or the scenario, the intro scenario, I guess you could say, for the game. It's Scenario Pack 1, and it also comes with some other scenario packs. So here you have scenario pack 2, and then you also have, or I'm sorry, this is 3, and then you have scenario pack 2 here, and then you also have a deck of cards that you can add to that first scenario to make it different, a little bit longer, and so forth and so on. They've also said that they're going to come out with these scenario packs, I think they said something like 2 a year, or something to that effect. So they have a lot of good plans for the game, and I think it's going to be one that will do well for them. I know that everybody I've played it with so far has really enjoyed it. You know, the learning game is always a little bit more difficult to get through, but on subsequent plays, it really has shined a lot. I think there's a lot of thematic goodness in this game. So I'm going to give this one 2 thumbs up. I don't really usually like deck builders, but I really do enjoy this one, and I enjoyed it a lot. So that is Edge of Humanity from Golden Egg Games. So go check it out if you can. We'll see you guys on the flip side.